Okay, as it is 5:15, I call the Planning Commission meeting of December the 5th to order. We get a roll call.
Sorry. Mr. Gerard,
Here.
Mr. Frechter,
Here.
Mr. Giller,
Here.
Mr. Lees,
Here.
Ms. Proper,
Here.
Mr. Guerra,
Here.
and Ms. Gort.
Here.
Okay, does anybody have any changes to the meeting, the minutes? Okay, as there's no objections to the minutes, we'll say that they are approved. Staff, is there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
That's good to hear. As part of the certified local government, we are asked to take public comment on historical preservation issues in the community. And with that, I'll open it up to any public comment. Doesn't look like anybody. Well, there is somebody here. If there's no public comment in the room, can you check and see if anybody is online?
Mhm.
Nobody is online. Okay, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. We have 9 Rounds residents at 9 Rounds Road, PL 2023-0554.
I'm not thinking about a call up, but I do have some questions I'd like to ask the
Okay.
applicant.
All right.
And a very brief report from the planning department.
You'd like a report?
Very brief.
Brief, he says.
Do we need to call it up if there's going to be a report out?
If you just want to ask a couple questions, you can do that, Steve. I mean, if we get more.
I
more in
don't
discussion.
want to call it up.
Right.
I'm in favor of the project, but I do have some questions.
That's okay, as long as we don't get too far down the road.
So do we need the planner to read the report?
No, just ask questions.
And I would go straight to the applicant if that's our applicant. If you come on up and name and address for the record, and then I'll ask what I want to ask.
I'm Tim Gerken with Rooted Architecture.
You put together a very, very nice design, and I was very pleased to see that we didn't circle around to hide the garage in the back and have a nice long driveway that went around and around. My questions are these, and you would have no reason to know this, but one of the topics that's been discussed recently on the commission deals with exterior lighting. And there wasn't an electrical cut sheet or a sheet there, and just the drawings that I looked at. So the exterior lighting that's affixed to the wall that I can see on your plans seems highly appropriate. I'm wondering if you're planning can lights or any other kind of lighting that would be exterior of nature other than what's shown.
There are sometimes plans to do can lighting in that covered roof, covered exterior deck area on the west side. But it would be very minimal, if any, really. But no, to directly answer the question, no, there's really not too many can lighting to also be presented there.
I think at some point in time, there are going to be discussions about limiting the number of exterior lights.
Mhm.
And just by way of encouragement, while this project is in its kind of infancy, I would encourage the smaller number, the better. And I also encourage being able to switch the lights so that one switch doesn't illuminate 18 lights, and that one switch at the entry could illuminate 1 or 2 lights there without illuminating a ton of other lighting.
Sure.
The town is making an application and has a desire to become a dark sky community, and that would help in that regard.
Sure.
So otherwise, I think it's a great looking project. Thanks for answering my questions. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
So, Chris, we don't need a motion. It's,
Nope, you can just declare the consent calendar stands as approved unless there's any other questions or
yeah, the consent calendar is approved. There's no other questions from any commissioners? You good, Mike?
Good design, Tim.
All right.
I echo Steven's comments. So thanks for not making a big driveway.
All right, I guess we'll move on to the work session. We're going to talk about vestibules in the Conservation District.
So this has come up recently. Provided a couple of examples of where these are being used, temporary vestibules. And we don't, as you probably remember, we don't allow temporary structures in the historic district or in the conservation district in general, with some very limited exceptions where like for an event for 3 days or something like that. Anyway, as we were talking about these and working with property owners that some of them that put these in did it during COVID, and we relaxed rules and we didn't enforce this type of thing. Got past COVID now, at least the brunt of it. And at this point, we're, working with a few property owners that haven't already to get these removed. But it did bring up the issue that we talked about internally, in terms of is there a benefit for the use of these vestibules from a energy use perspective, sustainability. They obviously provide a barrier of sorts between the main, the inside space and the outside space. And if you've ever been in somewhere where you have this kind of situation, or you've been in a place without a vestibule, as soon as that front door opens, you're sitting there and all of a sudden you're freezing. And then, so there's got to be, some air exchange there that's happening. So we thought this would at least be worth discussing. We've got a little resistance frankly, from some of the business owners who would put some investment into these. And so anyway, we thought we'd at least have this discussion with the planning commission and then follow that up with the town council. So that coming to you guys first to kind of get your thoughts, because certainly we still want to talk about the aesthetics and if it belongs in the conservation district at all. So I'm just going to go through real quickly here some of the points in my memo. We really think that based on the handbook of design standards, there's a fair amount of policies that I provided on the second page of my memo that really the placement of the non-historic vestibule addition in the front door, it obscures that front door appearance and so can alter the character or the integrity potentially if you're putting a permanent vestibule out there. You're actually building it with lap siding and all the things you'd probably typically see on a conservation district development. But we did want to talk about the use of temporary vestibules during the winter months, and if that's something that might be considered acceptable. And the primary reason we talked about that is because it's a reversible situation. It's not altering any of the historic fabric. And, as one of the policies I quoted here, we really are, anything like additions, et cetera, should be reversible. So it's very easy for that to be taken off at any point in time. So that's kind of the reason we wanted to kind of further discuss this. When you talk about non-historic structures, it's a little less clear actually in the code whether these would be in conflict. I'm not sure that they would, other than on the 100 block South Main. That's our core commercial area where it's talking about we want the storefronts right up against the sidewalk. There's no room there. And in fact, they want a little recessed door entrance. But there's no room for a vestibule in that situation. But in the other areas, there's usually a front yard. You know, even on North Main, South Main areas, they have a front yard character. There's still room potentially to put a vestibule in. And then finally, we've got the transition character area, South Main transition character. There's also North Main, which I didn't quote in the document here, but it talks about the policy on the character windows, doors, and architectural details generally are not as critical in the transition area there. So that leads us to believe that it's probably less of a concern in those situations. So we had several questions related to that. Does the Planning Commission agree with the staff's interpretation that permanently constructed exterior vestibules could be permitted on new or existing non-historic buildings? And we'll get to all the questions at the end. And then also wanted to ask the commission's thoughts on allowing temporary exterior vestibules on non-historic buildings as well. And then the other issue is density. And that, you know, the reason these things pop up is because no one wants to use their valuable interior space to put a vestibule in, because that's another solution, obviously. So it would be a matter of granting a small amount of density if it was something that we wanted to consider allowing. And then from a sustainability perspective, you know, we talked with the sustainability staff. They were, you know, said, yeah, it makes sense that this would help with some energy efficiency in terms of if you had these. However, they weren't able to find any kind of studies or anything that would, you know, substantiate that information and say, yeah, it would increase by this much. I was able to get some data from one of the restaurant owners on electric use, and it was pretty inconclusive, actually, when I took a look at it. But there's a lot of variables there. For example, you could have one year where it's real cold, next year it's warmer. So it's, you know, you're not using up as much electricity. So anyway, we did point out something that I'm not really familiar with that much, but, you know, found out about in this research is these air curtains. As some of you guys probably understand how they work better than I do, but basically they create that barrier, and you place them above the doorway and they flow air downwards, and it creates that barrier between the cold air outside and the warm air inside. And so we think those have some good potential as an alternative to actually having to put a vestibule in. Did talk with one of the restaurant owners, and they're like, I can't do it in my situation. You can come over and see. And anyway, there may be some complications with existing buildings and making that happen in every situation. I don't know. And we did talk with Aspen. Actually, our sustainability staff did. And what Aspen indicated, they actually require a vestibule or some type of airlock because of that energy efficiency piece. Or you can do an air curtain, and they pretty much frown on the use in the exterior because of the conservation district issue. Now, this is mainly related to new construction, as I understood it, is related to me. But anyway, so what they're seeing is a lot of air curtains on new development being installed, which obviously I think you got more opportunity to set it up so that works. So I've got a series of questions. Does the commission believe the use of temporary vestibules on historic structures during the winter months is something that might be acceptable? Secondly, does the commission agree with the staff's interpretation that permanently constructed exterior vestibules can be permitted on new or existing non-historic buildings with the exception of the core commercial area? Third, does the commission believe that temporary exterior vestibules on non-historic buildings are appropriate? Fourth, does the commission support wave and density requirements for exterior vestibules? And finally, are there any other comments that you may have? So that's my overview, and I'd be glad to try to answer any questions you guys might have. And then we can have some just open dialogue on this. just a work session, so.
Just a general question. So you said that a lot of these were put up during COVID. Would they put up because there was non-enforcement, or was there some function that they provided to help with the spread of COVID?
Yeah, I don't know if it was, they're big enough to really help much with that function, but I guess to an extent they may have,
Uh-huh.
Alan. But, you know, probably some took advantage of a situation that, you know, because we just weren't doing active enforcement on things they did at that period in time. It was a tough, as you remember, tough time for the restaurant owners, business owners. So we were just relaxing our rules.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually had a town manager order that removed a bunch of required code, including signage and temporary structures in some cases, so
Okay.
this was part of that.
So Susan,
Yeah, I have a few questions. First of all, if we allowed temporary vestibules on the historic buildings, would we specify the dates on which they could be installed and would have to be removed?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I would,
just think it
I
would be
would
for,
support
you know,
that.
I don't know, maybe November to May to April or something like that, you know, whatever
Right.
we determined was definitely.
What are the barriers to installing air curtains in commercial buildings? As you said that there were some opposition to it.
I don't understand what those barriers are. I did not get a chance to go to the restaurant owner's place to actually look at it. He just referred to a panel above there that was, I don't know if it's a room issue, you know, just not the space or what it was in his particular situation.
Okay.
They're fairly noisy.
Or are they?
Yes.
Okay.
And they require ductwork and a pretty powerful fan blower motor to keep them going.
Yeah, so given that, I was curious, whether, you know, how much energy use we'd need just to operate this air curtain versus, would that eliminate the benefit of keeping the cold air from coming in?
probably not. The other advantage we have here is that our heating is generally through radiant floor heating. And once you get that mass heated up, it's less of an issue. It is an issue when you open the door, but it's less of an issue than you have in a commercial building that has forced air heating. The forced air heating will go right out the door, and then you've got to heat that air mass before you get a comfort level. Whereas with the kind of heating that we have in the radiant floor, the air heats immediately from the heat mass that is already in the building.
I wonder how prevalent that is in the historic district.
Radiant floor, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. I doubt that it's prevalent
Yeah,
in a lot of the historic district.
yeah.
But you're correct in saying any of recent or new builds, generally people are going for radiant, yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
I had a couple of
Yeah.
more things. Can air curtains be used on historic structures or would they be?
Yeah, it's pretty much interior work, so, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. The last thing is that I have noticed, particularly in a couple of the restaurants downtown, that they use heavy fabric curtains right inside the doorway. Is that something else that we want to encourage? It seems like it works fairly well.
Yeah, I think Mother Loaded has that. Yeah. So,
Yeah, Southridge has it, Sancho's has it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's interior, it's totally would be allowed unless there was some issue with the building code.
Yeah,
But it would,
But it might be another thing that we could
right.
put out there.
Mhm.
I have a question. I want to talk about safety. Like these all look very plasticky and highly flammable. As far as like getting people out of a building, are they known to be a hazard? Or you talk about a curtain inside the building. I don't know. We live in a pretty volatile area with people burning fires and candles in the places. So I guess I have a concern about that. And what kind of materials would they be made of? Would it just be this clear plastic that I'm seeing? Or
Well, I think we
having a
could certainly,
standard?
have more discussions about that and make sure we have something that's not going to be highly flammable, but yeah, I can't speak to these materials that right now, but we could definitely do some research into that.
I would guess just looking at them, because there are other, you'll see them in other cities, that have cold weather, and I gotta imagine they have some kind of rating that they would, be fire resistant and meet building codes. Is it like the Legends one, for example, looks like, things you see commonly in Denver or other, think of cities, I've seen them in Chicago and other places, Washington, DC.
Ethan.
So it seems that we're here talking about this because of the sustainability issue. For the most part.
Yeah.
Right. So, my comments on, as Susan pointed out, the air curtains, every time I've been near one, I'm like, whoa, that stall got a lot of energy. So it seems to me that if it's about sustainability, the air curtains are, no, to me, I think you're losing more energy there than you're saving. As far as the vestibules, looking at these two photographs, which I think are great, because the one on Legends looks kind of good. The one on the tin plate is, well, it is what it is. So I would bring up, we would need to control, if we allow these vegetables, well, then the sky's the limit unless we create a code on what they can be and, size and appearance, materials. It seems use. Yeah, we're opening a can of
The
worms.
tin plate is not a vestibule. It looks like an outdoor bar. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
On the left
And I
side.
think that's a great example. I was glad to see that because, yeah. So yeah, those, look at the other questions you had there.
One of the things that came to my mind when I started looking at this and thinking about it, and the pictures sort of bear this out, is it going to encourage people to put these up and create more dining space by creating more heated outdoor locations for sort of that indoor outdoor dining that maybe doesn't even exist anymore?
Yeah, I mean, it could, it depends how we address it, but if we put some pretty strict parameters on how big it could be, I mean, Chris and I were talking the other day, I mean, you could do something like a 4x6 entrance. You're not going to fit any dining tables in that. Something small enough that allows for that, barrier, but, it's not large, like, yeah, I could see, you could probably fit a table in that front area over there on tin plate.
That was my thought, and
Yeah.
people deciding to use it for
Standing bar.
Yeah.
it's not a vestibule. It doesn't at that point in time serve that purpose. It just
Right.
creates a larger outdoor space usable in the winter.
To be the devil's advocate on the, 4x6, every building's going to be different. So somebody will say, well, that doesn't work for my space. My space is 7x9. And to bring it, you see my point. I just see us falling down a rabbit hole with this personally. And where do we go with it and keeping it reined in? I agree with the sustainability side of it. I think that's a real concern. And also, we've all sat inside one of these restaurants waiting for a meal or have a table right next to the door where every time somebody opens it, you freeze your butt off. So I see that side of it, but I think that's enough. I just see some rabbit holes we could fall down.
Mike, do you have some comments?
Thank you, Chair. First, a clarification. the tin plate actually has two on the front, one on the side there that appears to be the entrance, and then a second one on the front. That I'm not sure what that one is, but could the town speak to that?
Yeah, I think the tin plate, actually, the front door is where the entrance or the little greenhouse looking thing pops out from the front. That's the front door. And then the other part is actually kind of enclosed the historic porch on the side, which has a secondary entrance to it. But I think somebody pointed out their suspicion is they were using that for seating, and I think that's probably fairly likely, just knowing the circulation for that building.
Okay.
One other thing, Cliff mentioned, I believe they use one as a waiting area for their to-go window, if they have like some sort of to-go window, and so they'll have people wait in that vestibule for it.
Hmm.
And yeah.
But it kind of defeats if the goal of this is sustainability, it kind of defeats the purpose if we allow them to enclose an outdoor space and use it for service in the middle of winter, enclose it with plastic, because you're using a lot more energy and, propane heaters and stuff to make that space comfortable.
And lighting.
And that too. And
Lighting doesn't take much.
So then my second thought is,
Permanent.
I get energy conservation and I appreciate historic buildings, but really the bulk of these solutions should be internal. And I know in a lot of the national park historic hotels will throw up an interior fabric or curtain vestibule. And I know that floor space is precious, but I'm worried that the driver on this may be a real estate grab rather than energy conservation. And so if we do this, I'd like to see something that requires an interior vestibule to be the first choice. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. Steve?
I just have a comment when we get around to comments as opposed to questions.
And I know that was a comment more than a
Kinda doing
question.
Both right now.
I
Yeah.
guess I don't feel very sorry for anybody who wants to push back against this, because I'll bet they didn't get any permits to make these changes when they made them. And
Well, they didn't need it. They didn't need a permit. As Julia said, the manager's order basically rescinded our requirements on this kind of stuff.
but that's not in place anymore. So there you go. End of story.
Have you guys considered any kind of point system where you can earn points for doing something else to your building, and then we maybe let them do this? I don't know.
And
It seems like we really need to balance like the comfort of the people in the restaurant versus how the place looks. I mean, Breckenridge is, the way it looks is what makes it so special. And if you start putting all this stuff up, it really detracts from it. So that's a real balance thing. So I don't know if we could do like some kind of point system. I know it's hard. All the judges come up with that in the Supreme Courts and stuff, all these factors, 5 prongs with sub decisions. I don't know.
Do you have anything else, Steve?
No, that's my only comment.
Any other comments?
I don't have any others.
How about you, Alan?
Do you want us to each of us to answer the questions?
I think after just these general
Okay,
comments.
I have no more comments then.
I've got a few comments. With regards to the density, I think that Mike's point is that, very good, but this needs to be accomplished internally. As a business person, I have no compassion for another business person who wants to whine about compromising their square footage, because it's a cost of doing business. You know exactly what you're getting into when you open a restaurant. You know what the floor plan is. You know how many tables you can get in there. And if you have a cost of losing customers because it's too cold near the front door, then you need to accommodate that, and it's a cost of doing business. And I just have no compassion with that argument at all. in terms of the sustainability, we're kind of, we need to approach these sustainability issues when they tend to compromise the character of Breckenridge, much as the solar panels on the front of buildings, and decide when we have contrast between those two things, what wins out. And we need to look at the fact that Breckenridge is special because it is historic, because it has such a historic district. And although we all want to maintain a certain level of sustainability, I think when those two things are in contrast, the historic nature and the look and the aesthetics of Breckenridge needs to win that argument. And in terms of air curtains, I hear what everybody's saying about them being noisy. Apparently, they're making it work in Aspen. And there are different sizes of air curtains. They can be sized to the opening and to the building, and it's all a matter of CFMs and how much air gets pushed per minute. And there's ways of putting that in, damping the acoustics there, whatever, if somebody wants to accomplish that without building an interior vestibule to compromise their square footage. And again, this is a business decision that a restaurant owner has to have. And this particular issue tends to be more of a restaurant issue than it is for the other commercial buildings, because if you walk around Breckenridge in the wintertime, a lot of the store vendors will have the doors propped open to get traffic in. And they're not concerned about what their heating bill is. It's the restaurant issue. And again, I don't have a lot of sympathy for them.
Okay, maybe we can now have each commissioner go through the questions, and it'll be, I just want to, as you probably could tell, I mean, staff is not strongly advocating for this. We wanted to bring it up as an issue and just to kind of be able to say, we've explored it, we'll go to town council and we'll see what they ultimately decide to do with your recommendation.
So I'll go down the list. Does the commission believe, number one, use of temporary vestibules in historic structures during the winter months is something that might be acceptable?
I'm not hugely in favor of it. I think I would prefer an interior solution.
So you would vote no,
Um,
that question.
yeah, I mean, I don't think we're voting, but,
We are.
You would
Oh,
answer
we are.
no.
okay. Yeah, I would vote no.
Okay, and on the second one, does the commission agree with the staff?
One question.
Okay, all right. We'll go through the first question with everybody. Ethan?
I do not believe that it's an acceptable solution in the historic district.
Mike?
Um,
Question number one.
In general, I think the first location should be the interior. On rare occasions, we might consider it on the exterior.
I don't think it's acceptable.
I overall think it's not very acceptable, but I do think there might be situations out there like a side entrance or something like that, that maybe we could allow it.
Alan?
Yeah, I'd say generally no, and I would, this might be something like what we do for solar in the historic district, that you have to try internal first, and this would be a last resort, but it would have to, it'd be a special circumstance that would have to be approved by by staff.
And I would say no as well. Second question, does the commission agree with the staff's representation that the permanently constructed exterior vestibules can be permitted in newer existing non-historic buildings, with the exception of the core commercial areas?
I would say yes.
I would be supportive of it as long as, and of course, I'm sure it would be that it met all applicable codes and as long as it looks as part of the building as opposed to a add-on. Does that make sense?
Mike,
I think there's more opportunity and more flexibility in a non-historic building to construct them in the interior, and that should be the first and only place we allow.
I agree that it would be appropriate so long as it was contained within the square design of the building, and as you can remember exactly how you put it, it shouldn't project out into the sidewalk or the front of the building.
I just want to make sure I understand the question. So we're asking if we agree that they can permanently construct exterior vestibules in the historic buildings? Is that what the question is?
Yeah, well, it's probably worded a little incorrectly because honestly, it really does become an interior vestibule at that part of the point, if it's that part of the structure.
Okay, so I'm okay with interior vestibules, but not exterior, new addition ones
On non-historic buildings.
on.
I guess the issue is that we also are talking about existing buildings, so it's not just new buildings.
So on new buildings, I'm fine with it, but not on existing. Maybe in a limited situation. Which would be similar to what the limited, I guess we kind of talked about. If it's the only option and they're not in the front, something like that. How's that for a vague answer?
pretty vague. Alan?
I think the fact that you got the word permanent there, it just has to meet the existing code. And it needs to be a permanent structure, not plastic curtains and things like that. So I think it's self-defined. I think it's answered in how you're asking it.
Yeah.
It just has to meet our existing building and design codes.
I agree with Alan. I do want to agree with Mike and say that we need to promote these on the interior of the building. And particularly with new construction, that's something that can be designed in. And if it's going to be something on the exterior, then again, I think that needs to be permitted and looked at during the permitting process to see if it's an appropriate structure for the building in question. Number 3, does the commission believe that temporary exterior vestibules on non-historic buildings are appropriate?
Well, I assume that we're not talking about the core commercial district here. But still, I really think that either there should be an interior solution or a permanent exterior solution on a non-historic building that would be consistent with the code and with the look of the building.
I'm hesitant to support any temporary exterior vestibules.
Mike?
You have to unmute there.
I agree with Ethan and others that the first solution is interior. I don't support it on the exterior of a contemporary building. There's a lot of thought put into the elevation of a new building, and to attach a temporary awning or tent-like structure to it really does detract.
No, not appropriate.
No,
Alan?
No.
we're very negative.
I agree, no. Okay, question number 4, does the commission support waiving density requirements for exterior vestibules?
So here I assume we're talking permanent exterior vestibules, is that?
Well, either, yeah.
Could go either way.
Town council overrules
If they
us
said it
because-
was
They can do whatever they want.
So
even if it's temporary, we could still require density for it.
Um. I don't know. I think that, that's a harder question. I would probably say no.
I mean, to throw another just scenario in, if you're designing from the ground up and you're trying to do an interior one, so it really is not visible from the outside. I mean, a way to encourage it maybe would be to exclude that density from being counted as density or being counted for PIFs or parking or other things that we have to count density as. So it isn't solely applying to something that's kind of a bump out from the building. You could even be so specific to say, hey, if you're willing to do this from the beginning and design it kind of internally, you could probably make the rest of the building overall a little larger, possibly. I mean, that'd be one scenario.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting point, Chris. And I guess I'd be open to that.
I look at this as you mentioned, Chris, as a ground up issue. If you're building a new building, and I would be willing to consider waiving density with some pretty strong language of size and usage, square footage, and what that use is for. I think that we can consider that based on the sustainability question, that it would make sense. So that's where I'm at.
As an interior.
As an absolutely, as something that's designed into the building.
Because yeah, that could even work potentially in the historic building using the Tin Play as an example. Obviously, they have their historic original building there. They have the restaurant, and then they have the addition that is compliant. But let's say if there was, a 6x9, 54 square feet that they used initially in programming and designing it, that could have been used, somewhere else, whether it be the restrooms or other things that they were trying to really, minimize the square footage, since that site obviously was maxed out. So that'd be another scenario for an existing building with an addition, that you could potentially incentivize it as well in the remodel.
So just to refocus, the question specifically is asking for waiving the density of exterior vestibules.
But what
Yeah.
makes it exterior? What makes it exterior?
Outside of the footprint of the building makes it exterior.
Okay, so I guess I answered that incorrectly. Because
We kind of what Chris brought up is a separate question, honestly. So maybe we just, back to Mark's point, answered this question, and then if we want to, we can weigh in on Chris's.
okay, well, I'd like to revisit my answer then, and I apologize because we all didn't believe that temporary exterior vestibules are appropriate. And now we're asking about exterior vestibules again on density. So you can't have both. So I guess I would say no on the density if we're talking about exterior. I'm sorry, I didn't read that correctly. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike?
Short answer is no.
I don't.
Oh, let me expand on that. Over the last handful of years, we worked to reduce bonuses and things like that in projects, whether it's circulation space or the 20% bonus in the historic district. And I think it would be a mistake to start allowing additional density now. Thank you.
So what you're saying is we need to be consistent with this density issue,
Yes.
regardless of the application. Is that correct?
Yes, well stated.
Thank you.
Steve, since I don't support exterior vestibules under any circumstance, I certainly do not support waiving density requirements for them.
I'm going to ditto what he says, but I also want to talk about interior vestibules. I think that we should look into supporting waving density for interior vestibules, especially for new construction, to encourage this more eco-friendly kind of entrance and more comfortable entrance area to be used, you know, so customers sitting there dining can be comfortable.
I say no for exterior. Are we gonna come back around for interior, or should I give my opinion
We
on
can
it?
do that.
Go back
Next
around?
Questions, other comments?
It's our meeting. We can do that. It's a work.
I'll hold
session.
back on interior density then.
I say no, and I'm not in favor of waiving density requirements for any of this. Again, back to my argument about it's a cost of doing business. You got a restaurant, you know what you got to deal with, and you need to deal with it and not whine about density. So want to go back and revisit this same question with interior?
Well, I guess I'll clarify my comment, because as far as the exterior ones, my answer was no. With the point that Chris raised regarding the interior, I would be open to waiving some density to allow them to create some sort of airlock kind of space.
I would echo that, to tag along my previous statement, and I guess I meant it to be about interior on new construction. And my comment was that I'd be willing to consider that. What I mean by that is, let's open up the conversation on allowing some waiving of density on an interior vestibule and weigh that against the sustainability issue. We are, as a town, trying to go sustainability. It's a very important issue here, and I think that this is worth discussing.
Comments, Steve? I'm sorry, let me get Mike. Mike, did you have a comment about interior and waiving density?
I think the more appropriate way to do that might be to tweak the existing energy code. Because a building's required to do an energy code or energy analysis, and if there were a way to, within that, to incentivize a vestibule, that's where that belongs.
Thank you, that's a good comment.
Mike, can you talk about that a little bit? I don't know very much about the energy code.
So in general,
Any idea of how you're thinking that would look?
well, I'm not sure, but in general, one has to do a thermal model of a building. You plug in the elevations, the insulation, the windows, and the appliances, the lighting, and things like that. So you build a digital model of how that building will perform. And I would think you could add a vestibule in there somehow as a line item, or even at the end, something that one would allow and apply a few points one way or the other, for or against. Exactly how that works, I honestly don't know, but that's where that kind of thing belongs.
If I may tag along on that, I think that where the model doesn't work there, Mike, is that we're talking about a business that the door opens again and again and again and again, and that's where we're losing all the energy. How do you plug that into the energy code model? I don't know that is applicable.
Yeah, I'm not sure how, but I mean, that's where everything else with respect to energy use is evaluated in a building.
I think Mike's point is that the sustainability portion of this really does belong in the energy code, and any incentives to encourage better energy utilization would be appropriate in the energy code portion of this rather than in the density portion of it. Because the minute you open the density issue, as Mike alluded to, and as Chris alluded to, you're talking about the employee housing issue, you're talking about the water issue, you're talking about a lot of other issues that really don't have anything to do with energy. So I think that Mike's comment is probably an appropriate comment with respect to the trade-off between energy code incentives and density incentives.
Yeah, I mean, I think we understand that, but to Ethan's point, I mean, there, you could design a net zero building, but if you have the doors and when your business and you have the door open all day long, it's to be above net zero based on the calculation of having that tight building envelope. Anytime you just have this penetration to the building envelope, there really isn't a way to model it for that scenario. So I think that's why we have other things in the code, you know, under policy 33R that we do incentivize people that they kind of run parallel, but don't have the exact technical specifications of, you know, the green building code.
Again, Chris, in a commercial building, and this is not really appropriate to small restaurant in Breckenridge, but in a commercial building, one of the reasons that they have a revolving door is that that revolving door traps energy. In the summertime, it keeps the cool energy, the cool air inside. In the wintertime, it keeps the hot air outside. Air curtains do the same thing. So there's technology for that is appropriately modeled in the energy code or not.
Well, I mean, the way
That kind of a vestibule could be part of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, usually what we do for our modeling, you know, scenario, and Ethan's right, fairly familiar with this, is we have a blower door test where it's assuming that that door is shut and it's trying to figure out where that air is going, you know, where the weaknesses are in the envelope. You know, if we had the back door open while we're doing the blower door test on it, then it really
Whole nother animal. Because, you know, nobody takes into consideration when you're doing a blower door test on a residence that somebody's going to be opening a window or going out the back door. That's completely a different animal than the actual use of the house or the use of the commercial business in this instance.
I'm struggling with seeing where, to me, the density question and the energy code are two separate issues. We're being asked, are we willing to waive density in order to get an interior vestibule? Basically an airlock. I don't see how that's a question for the energy code. It simply is, are we willing to waive density to give them an airlock?
Yes, the question that Mike raised is the incentive appropriate to density or is it appropriate to energy? So,
So that's an additional comment from Mike,
yeah,
and staff
on.
can look at that and see if they can find a way to make that work.
just move on.
I'm going to begin with the assumption that an interior vestibule does in fact save some amount of energy. I think Mike is correct that we're looking at this from the sustainability and the energy use standpoint, and in the energy code is the place it should be addressed. If we begin with the assumption that an interior vestibule does save some amount of energy, if somebody wants to put one of those in, I think we should incentivize it with a +1 point that they could cure a sin with by using their positive point. I don't think it's a density issue. I think it's, are we bettering this building from an energy standpoint? And if so, we give them a benefit.
So just to clarify your statement and not incentivize it with density.
Not incentivize it with density.
That's a good point, Steve.
You all have great points, but I'm going to be on the other side. I'm going to support waiving density because I think there's other benefits other than just saving energy. It improves the building and the comfort and the longevity of it. I think that's the way things should be built in the future, and we should encourage that. I do think we should be careful that they're not putting like huge benches for their waiting area and things like that to kind of milk the extra square footage. So very limited vestibule size.
I think Elaine has a point that, if first of all, I don't think we should do density. I think if we should allow density for it. I think it opens up a rabbit hole. If some reason we're overruled on that, I think Elaine has a point. It's got to be really strictly defined, no service in it, no furniture in it. And it has to be a permanent structure that defines it. So that all of a sudden in the summer, they take these walls down and more tables, becomes part of the main restaurant. But overall, I think it becomes, then you guys have to enforce it. So it becomes more work, and it's, like I said, it becomes a rabbit hole. So I would say no to giving additional density, but if that's the route you end up going, it's got to be really well defined in terms of the amount of space and the use and what's in it, and making sure it's permanent. It doesn't become service space in the summer.
Okay, my answer would be a simple no. All the reasons that I've commented on.
How yours is.
Does the commission have any other comments? Susan?
No further comments.
Ethan? No. Mike?
No?
Steve?
No, thank you.
None, thank you.
Alan?
None.
Okay, and I have none.
Great. Thanks, guys. That's super helpful. Like I said, we just wanted to vet this a little bit, and really good discussion, I thought.
I think we kind of muddied the waters, but hopefully we're giving you some direction.
I think it's a really muddy question. I think that this is an
It
issue
is.
that we could talk around for a long time and adjust our views on it. I know I did and will.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, to give you guys a little credit, you did clearly state that you're not in favor of the temporary structures, which was really kind of the main question we had. So
Yeah.
the other parts are kind of the nuances just with the airlock in general. So I think we did get some good consensus out of it.
yeah.
So we're not gonna get any service at Tin Plate or don't show your face there.
Well, don't wear your blue jacket there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can just tell you that this conversation and the one we'll have next month with the council helps in that, we'll have some, some upset restaurant owners, and we can say, hey, we had this discussion just now with, planning commission and town council. So it's not like we just ceremoniously said, no, you can't do this forever. At least we had the dialogue. So thank you for that. All right, town council.
Yes.
So, I'm gonna just quickly, let's see, it was on the 28th last week. Let me see, mainly we just had a couple, issues related to planning that we wanted to go over. So, one was on exterior lighting. And it was mainly about decorative lights. Julia, if you want to just give them a little more detail, that'd be wonderful.
Hi. Yeah, so we had gone to the council on the 14th of November and gotten most of our questions answered, but their decorative lighting needed more information. So we took that to them, talked about colored LEDs. Essentially, the decisions made, I guess, were this, to allow for colored LEDs. And not require warm lights would not be required for decorative lights. The bulb size of 3 inches max was supported. The The dates were November 1st through April 1st for all lighting zones. And the curfew would be for lighting zone 1 of 2 a.m. and lighting zone, or sorry, 1 and 2. No, 1 at 2 a.m. and then 2 and 3 at 11 p.m. And that's just decorative lights. And then conformance with all that by 2025. And then the one kind of remaining issue is they wanted to potentially look at limiting the amount of decorative lights on a building. So we're trying to work through that. That was not recommended by staff, because we're not quite sure how we would regulate that, because those are exempt in our code. And I don't think that we want to issue permits for everybody's decorative lights to calculate how much lights they're allowed to have on their building. So we're working through that. And then the other issue we had that was solved was the limit on number of light fixtures on the exterior of a home. And they supported that limitation. So what we're going to do is put the proposal with the fact sheet online, hopefully by the end of this week. And we're going to just leave it there for public comment. We'll push it out to some of our email listservs that we have here to contractors and architects, for example, and then we'll put it out on social media as well. And just kind of collect any comments from the public before we kind of go into the first reading aspect. So that's where we are right now. And yeah.
Julia, there's a question on the whole dark sky. Does the Global Dark Sky Committee come and do an audit, like an on-site audit, to see if everything put in place really works?
Yeah, if you remember, well, there's a lot of things we have to do to maintain. If we get certified, to maintain it, and one is annual reporting.
Okay.
There's also a dark sky monitoring program we have to put together as part of our application. And so every year we have to report on our light levels of our community. So
Yeah.
yes, in a sense, but I think we have to do it.
I just, when I'm out at night doing a late night dog walk, I just see this huge glow coming up from downtown
All the snow.
over the hill. And I just like, with all the carve outs and the dark sky compliance for the commercial district, I just really wonder if it either complies, or being dark sky compliant doesn't really create a dark sky.
I mean, there's such a thing as snow glow. So that's something we'll never get
I see it in
around.
the summer too.
So I think it's definitely going to do something.
Yeah, I think it'll change. That's why I was saying after this, particularly the street lights.
Yeah.
Changed. I
And-
think it might make a big difference,
And
but
so
I'm
that's,
just curious if they come and check and say, well, your carve out,
We're
still
having-
creating a bright light, and so we're going through this big expense and everything, and we're still, creating this glow over from the commercial district.
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, it's definitely going to go down. I think there's going to be less glow. There shouldn't be a whole lot of glow, honestly, because it should all be downcast. Except in the winter, it's just going to happen because of snow. So it's just what happens. With lights. So yeah, if you have additional comments, you can always submit them. I think we'll just do it via email. So it'll go to our general website ComDev email.
Okay.
And then we'll gather that all and forward it. So back to council with a check-in in January on it. on what we receive and kind of what our recommendations, if any, changes need to happen. And then we're planning to go to readings in February. That's the plan.
Great. The other main attraction was the continued BGV development proposal. And I'm going to let Chris give an overview of what was discussed.
So in the latest work session for BGV last week, we discussed parcels 1 and 2, which are the North Gondola lot and the North Gold Rush lot. And the North Gondola lot, the council was supportive of limiting that to just surface parking, surface skier parking. We did pose a couple of questions to them because right now we have a non-compliant parking lot that doesn't meet our current water quality standards, does not meet our lighting code, does not meet our landscaping and buffering. The council weighed in on all those items. Their primary objective, I guess the one concern is they do want the water quality brought up to code. And there was a plan to have some detention along with some vault space. And I think it was important to the council because it is directly adjacent to the Blue River. So that was something that they really did want support bringing up. But really their overall priority was not to have anything that would reduce the number of parking spaces that are being utilized there. So, lighting is one where it really wouldn't impact the number of parking spaces, but they supported a limited amount of lighting to make, they didn't want to light up the whole lot and I guess further erode our dark sky initiative, but they did recognize that that is a dark lot after dusk, and there should be some lighting for people that are coming back to their vehicles. In regards to the buffering and landscaping, because of how the lot is laid out currently, there's not a lot of opportunity to plant any new trees on the lot itself. Most of the adjacent space on both the Park Avenue and French Street side is actually within right of way. But they did support adding more landscaping adjacent to the lot in between the rec path along the river, and then a couple pockets in other areas around the property. So a pretty limited change from what you see today. I guess the next question was also about meeting snow stacking. Again, since most of the site is paved, it doesn't meet that 25% snow stack recommendation that the code has in place. The council felt they were comfortable with just having the snow stacking as it is because it's effectively worked for however many years that has been used as a parking lot. And really when we get into like a big winter scenario where we're really pushing snow stacking, they end up hauling it off anyway and contracting with Stan Miller. So that's kind of the highlights on parcel 1. On parcel 2, at the last meeting, the applicant had shown a parking structure wrapped with housing units on the eastern facade. The consensus from the planning commission or from the council at the last meeting was to have that scaled back and actually have some of the housing maybe moved over to the Entrada site, which is at the corner of Highway 9 and County Road 450 directly across from 7-Eleven. They really kind of wanted to minimize the look of development there, and really by reducing some of that housing on site, they could in turn reduce some of the parking that's needed. And we have a new plan that we'll be looking at next week where it actually eliminates the structure altogether, where both the parking for the proposed number of units on site as well as what's required by the parking agreement can be accommodated at surface. And with that, they introduced a new parcel 7, which is the Entrada site, and are exploring doing more workforce housing over there. So that's what we'll be reviewing at the next meeting. During that meeting, staff did emphasize that workforce housing is a very important component of this development agreement, and really would like to see housing. We think both of the sites are acceptable. And don't want it to be scaled back so much that we don't get any extra out of it. But that's having kind of meeting the balance between the direction of just having less building programming on the North Gold Rush site and still maintaining a decent amount of workforce housing overall is what's led us to the applicant exploring both the Entrada and the North Gold Rush sites for employee housing. So we'll keep you posted. We're tentatively thinking that this next work session on the 12th, a week from today, we think there's a good chance that we'll get to a resolution on most of the programming aspects. And then from there is where we actually have to dive into the complexity of the actual development agreement, which will be, I can safely assume it's to be the most complex development agreement we've ever had drafted. Understanding that we're giving ourselves enough time and the applicants enough time to have that document, a draft development agreement, to be reviewed at the second council meeting in January. So really over the full holiday period here where we can hammer out all the specific details, because there's a lot of everything from some smaller engineering waivers and other things, just really trying to look at it so it's a clear roadmap of what is in play by the time that you guys get to see master plan amendments and even site-specific development permits.
So Chris, just to clarify a couple things, the pushback on the density of the North Gold Rush, is that primarily the amount of people there, the foot traffic across the street? What's the pushback from council? What's their?
I think it's twofold, and depending on which, it was unanimous at the council level, with the exception of Kelly Owens. Maybe was a little bit open to having more there, but still didn't give us a specific amount. But it was twofold. I think there was concern about the amount of people living there possibly disrupting traffic as they cross the street, and then also just the perceived scale from Park Avenue. And I suspect now they haven't obviously seen the revised plans, but the large structure was kind of both the housing and the parking structure. So by not eliminating, but by scaling it back, the revised proposal has a total of 48 bedrooms on site. And so it's about 1/3 of what was previously programmed there, with the other 2/3 essentially moving to the Entrada site. But that will definitely limit the visual kind of development impact of what's perceived on that lot. So I think to some people that was maybe the more appealing one. To other people, they are more concerned about just the overall intensity of people living there.
And the development agreement, are you talking about one development agreement, which includes all the parcels? Or are we talking about a development agreement for the lower portion and another one for what's up on the mountain?
It's a development agreement that will cover all 7 parcels now, and really gives directions of how to review something in the future from that development agreement. I guess I'll start back with the schedule. So there'll be a draft development agreement that will be presented to the council at the second meeting in January. And that's where they're really looking at everything line by line and going through that, making sure that they're satisfied. So then we can bring that back for first reading at the first meeting in February, and hopefully there'll be little to no amendments to the development agreement, and then go to a clean reading at the second meeting in February.
I'm used to seeing development agreements that are tied geographically. So the concept of having some up the mountain and some here is kind of foreign to me.
Yeah, well, I guess development agreements are all over. What you'll see based off of that development agreement there'll need to be 2 different master plan amendments. One geographically down in the valley in the gondola lots area here. And then there'll be a separate one, the Peak 7 and 8 master plan, that will need to be modified based on the prescription of the development agreement up there. So that's where you get into the geographic specifics.
The plan will be a subset of the development agreement.
And then a third component now, a third geographic component would be annexing in the Entrada property and placing that in the land use district. So That's a couple of new items that would also need to be worked on by the planning commission. And from there, once and if those are all completed, then we would move into site-specific development permit reviews, which are even more unique in terms of the geographic specificity.
Yeah, and
So-
that's, I was just gonna say, just to concur with Chris, that we've never had anything this complicated. I mean, there's so many properties associated. Like you're saying, there's ones up here, down here, they all gonna be part, yeah, they're all gonna be part of the same thing, because it's all tied together. And it all has to work together as a whole. And so yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces.
I mean, with how complex it is, there's a couple things that, I think we've had, Sarah or Ellie has taken detailed minutes of every conversation in there, so we can go back to exactly what was said at each meeting, which has been extremely helpful, even as we're working through. Applicant side, they have a team that's, worked within the town quite extensively in the past, and notably Christy Matthews Lydell is the one that's really understands that code and is like, this is something we may need for this driveway, or, looking at it at that level of detail. And that's who we'll be working with, along with our town attorney and their legal team, but to really make sure that anything that there was the intent, whether an ask by the developer or something that's very important to the town, is covered in that draft document before the town council actually looks at it. So
Chris, where does the density component get dealt with? Is that in the development agreement, or is that in the master plan that's part of that?
it's in both, and that's a great question, Mark. Because everything is shifting around. So they're to be very precise of how many SFEs are going up to parcel 4, to the single family lots up at the ski area. How much of the developer's density pool is being allocated to the workforce housing component, and where that's specifically going. And from that prescription, when they when and if they apply for master plan amendments, that's where it will actually get tied to a document that says it now lives here. But the development agreement will obligate them to, if they want to use that density, they'll have to use it in a way that complies with the development agreement. So development agreement is definitely a safeguard for both the town and the developer, but ultimately the master plan amendment will be the real related density is the real roadmap of it's exactly tied to this spot geographically and at this intensity level.
Thank you.
Chris, when you brought up the Entrada lot, my first thought was, well, that's county. And then you mentioned the annexation, but the conversation started with assuming that that's town property when it's not, or town within the town. So my question is, if town council wants to annex it, it's a done deal. Is that how that works?
Not,
The owner has to agree.
yeah,
As long as the property owner and the town agreed, then it's a done deal. It doesn't have to go through any other.
Or it has to go through a process still, yeah.
Right, that's what I thought. So that I was just curious, because as this conversation started, I was like, the Entrada lot's not even town.
yeah, I mean, it definitely adds another layer,
Yeah.
just beyond just having yet another unique geographic location, but so all the things there's the whole annexation process, which is a whole other,
Right. that's all.
even if you have two parties that are agreeing to annex, there's all the legal steps you have to go through. And then placing in the land use district, even if, our map already has it designated in land use district 5, but there's still the formality of actually placing it in after you annex it in. So there's definitely, that adds to the complexity and number of steps beyond just modifying 2 master plans and doing all the site specific reviews.
So my question on the Entrada lot goes here then, because okay, so they're wanting to do workforce housing there. That's great. It hasn't come before us yet, but the first thing off my mind is ingress and egress to that spot is going to be a big deal.
Actually has come before us already.
Yes, it did, but
Yeah.
not in this package.
And a lot of those concerns.
The baseline for that is their old plans, because they did kind of get, say, halfway through the annexation process, and we have comments. And so, again, what will be included in the packet was the previous design, but we've identified, some of the issues, just in terms of like how large the building is, how much site coverage there is related to the parking because the building is large, and lack of buffering, and so those are things that we're pointing out in the memo, is like, they have this idea, we believe it needs to be scaled back. We're in support of housing in this area, not to the extent of the plans that we have as of today.
I'd forgotten we'd seen that, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So definitely more to come. There'll be a regular check-in for the town council update.
That's it.
Okay.
And you guys probably, I think, Jesse sent out, or Julia, the information on saving places. So, take a look at that, guys, and, sign up if you haven't. We really encourage that. It's a really good conference.
It's a great conference.
All right, 6:52. I adjourn the meeting.
Mark takes us out drinking every night. So.
Last time, didn't we?
I didn't go with you and Danny, so.